Hello, and welcome to the Kathleen Spracklin Podcast. I'm a woman on a mission to assemble a cadre of writers, thinkers, and teachers who are transforming the world one character at a time. And it all starts with one thing, a deep understanding of human motivation, why people do what they do, and the forces that drive them. This is episode number 10. Today we're looking at an amazing confluence of reason, faith, and science. An amazing intersection where all three are in perfect agreement. How often does that happen? And the area of perfect agreement is the character, strengths, and virtues. It's rather interesting the approach that each takes to them. Philosophy brings about a rationality, a thinking approach of how right reason can be transformed into human actions and behaviors, all well and beautifully thought out and categorized. Faith talks about the same things, and they talks about them in terms of developing the best potential of ourselves, who we are at the very depth of our being, how we can encounter our Redeemer, our God, and how we can ultimately reach heaven. Psychology takes its own approach. It defines them, it measures them, it defines interventions regarding them, and it carefully catalogs them and discovers that they are of enormous value when behavior is modified to conform in a manner that's in accordance with them. But of all three, the most amazing point is what happens when they encounter story. Because story goes deep and touches the heart. These character strengths and virtues, which have been so much studied, so deeply understood by the philosophers, by the theologians, and by the scientists, we reach a place where we know that they are deeply, deeply connected to the human person and have been for as long as man has been man. And therefore, when we study them as writers and take advantage of all three perspectives, we discover that something resonates deeply, deeply within us because they are speaking to something that is utter truth. And those truths not only touch our hearts, but they resonate with our readers. And when we explore these character traits, stories well up inside of us that just demand to be told. And we want to get those stories out. So that's kind of why I want to bring the character traits to my students. That's why I teach a 35-lesson course in them so that they can inspire transforming stories. But it's also why I was driven to co-found LPC, a Lilliputian Publishing Co-op, because the stories that come out of us, of people who read and study these character traits, are very important and very moving. But maybe we aren't born writers. So we need to have an entire community to help us take that story out from within us, get it ready to be shared, get it polished. We need to have readers who will read the story with fresh eyes and be able to tell us and come back and say, wait a minute, your reader doesn't know these things about your story that you're just assuming they know. So we can polish it and perfect the way we tell it. And we can have teachers of writing who can tell us how to better dramatize our story, how to pull our senses into the story, what order to reveal the details for the most dramatic appeal, so that when it's done, we can take this precious, precious story that came out of our hearts and make it polished and ready for presentation. Then we can gather these stories. If they're short stories, we can gather them into anthologies. If they're novels, we can collect them and polish them individually, and we can publish them because we're a publishing co-op, because that's our purpose. And then we have a community of readers who will carry our catalog with the descriptions of the works that we've created and bring it to their favorite brick and mortar bookstores, their favorite small booksellers, and say, I know this author, I know this story, you need to carry this book. And then they can form book clubs or convince their book club to follow that book. And others can read the stories that go very deep and touch the heart, because they're at the intersection of reason, faith, and science, that inner core of character traits that motivate human behavior. And that a whole new group of readers can be inspired by these stories and can be inspired to spill out the story that they have within their hearts. And so this is what I'm dreaming of. I'm dreaming of a web of communities. We are LPC, a Lilliputian Publishing Co-op. One of the things we want to do is to create a manifesto where we share what does it mean to be a Lilliputian Publishing Co-op. We want to expand these communities that are writer-centered, reader-supported, where readers get to know the writers, is almost feeling like it's one-on-one, whereas the writers can have a community that they have surround themselves with and have those personal touches, but because it's one to several, it doesn't drain them as much as having to have individual relationships with each person, and yet it's personalized. I think that it's going to be really exciting to see how this community is going to develop and flourish, and we're getting pretty darn close to opening our doors. So I guess I wanted to take this particular podcast to let you all know where this idea is coming from and where do we think it can go. So I want to thank you for listening, and I hope you will be waiting with bated breath for the LPC to open its doors. And if you want to be on a list to be notified, visit KathleenSpracklin.com, spelled just like my name, and sign up for my mailing list, and you will be one of the first to know when we open our doors. And it's not going to be a super long time in coming either. Thank you. Bye-bye.